Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So today we'll be talking about Git and GitHub. We'll be learning what is Git, GitHub and its differences, and we'll also be learning some common commands in Git and how we'll be using them. So let us start with the definitions. So definition goes like this. So we can just what is Git? Here the explanation given is Git is a free and open source distributed version control system that's responsible for everything GitHub, everything GitHub related that happens locally on our computer. So let us discuss what it is. Git is basically a software that is a version control system. So what do you think a version control system is? A version control system means it will track the changes that you have made on your project. That means you have a project and you have made one changes and some changes, and on another day you have made another change. These changes will be tracked by GitHub. So why do we need to track them? So maybe this is feature 1 and this is feature 2. So after making the feature 2, and there's some related code of feature 2 in feature 1 also. So after making this, what happens is that we decide to remove feature 2 or we decide to add something else. So we can either just go and backspace all the characters, all the codes there and delete it. But in a giant code base, it becomes too difficult. So in that case, if you have used Git in it, we will have a history. And with that history, we can revert back to the place where there was only feature 1. We can just revert back to a place where there was only feature 1 and there was no code related to feature 2. So this is what basically Git is. Git is basically a version control system. What is a version control system? It just saves the history of whatever that changes that you do in your directory. So now let's move on to what is GitHub. GitHub is a place where you can store and manage these codes. That means there is a local, that means this is your local laptop, and there is a remote origin, remote. So usually multiple people are working on a single project. These two people are working on a single project. So GitHub is basically, this is just GitHub. GitHub is basically a place where you can host these codes and access it from these computers. So Git is a software that will track the changes, and GitHub is basically a place where developer can store and manage these codes and use Git. So we understood the basics. So let's move on. So the next page is why use Git and GitHub. First, track history that we already have mentioned. Then collaborate. Collaborate means if me and a friend is working on a project, I have to make some features, he have to make some features. If we are going to wait for him to add the features, then only I can add the rest of the features, then it will be very bad and unproductive. So for collaboration means he can copy the code and I can also copy a code. That means he can have a branch and I can have another branch, and once we made the features, I made a feature and he also made a feature, then we can merge these two together. That is, in Git there are different branches. I can make a branch here called feature 1 and he can make a branch here called feature 2, and finally when both features are done, we can just merge the two and get our final product. That is for collaboration. So the next thing we can think about is, let me just erase this. The next thing is open source. We know that GitHub and Git is open source, that is, it is free and available to all. So then we can have one more thing is why Git is preferred. We know that Git is a version control system, but Git is not the only version control system there is. There are many other version control systems as well. So why is Git preferred? Because it is the most popular one. It is used in many of the largest company. It is free and open source, and also it is fast and scalable. Due to these points, it stands out from rest of its competitors. Therefore, Git is usually preferred in most of the companies these days. So let us move on to the differences. It is everything that I have told you already. If you want, we can just take a screenshot. That means Git is a software, GitHub is a service, that is, it will help us to store our data. It is a service that is allowing us to store these and collaborate. But we are using Git only. The software we are using is Git only. Next, Git, it is used locally on system. Git is usually used locally on system, but GitHub, it is hosted on the web. Multiple people can access it. Git is usually in our local system. Git is a command line tool. We can use Git bash to access it in Windows, and in Linux we, I think, can access it through the terminal. So Git is a command line tool. GitHub is a graphical use. GitHub provides a graphical interface. That means thus we can use our mouse and keyboards, and we can interact with it with graphics. While it is a Git is a command line tool, that means we'll use our keyboard to type commands to make it do things. Next things, Git, it is a tool to manage different versions of edits made to the file of in the Git repository. We have a Git repository, and Git will just manage the version and edits. It will just track the history. That is all what this is to say. GitHub, it is a space to upload a copy of the repository. That means in our local means in our system, there is a GitHub repository. In our system, there is a GitHub repository that we can upload a copy in GitHub. If we upload that copy in GitHub, other people can view our code. So that is the basic gist of it. So the next thing that comes is it provides functionalities like version control system, code management. It is basically same thing. And GitHub, it provides functionalities like visual VCS or version control systems, source code management, as well as adding its own few features. There are some other small features in GitHub as well. We can open it in online version of Visual Studio Code and make the changes then and there itself. We don't have to actually download it to our system to make the changes. So there are some additional features of GitHub as well. So this is basically the difference between Git and GitHub. So I hope everyone has now an understanding of what Git is and GitHub is. So for configuring Git, if you have downloaded Git bash in your system, you have to configure it first. First, we have to use git config -- global user .name, and we have to provide your username and also provide an email. This is basically for setting up a user, and -- global means it is set up for the whole computer. And to check it, if you have git bash in your computer, you can just check that using git config -- list. This is basically to check what the user is being set to. If you have set a username and you have to check it, if the username is correct, you can just use list to view it. So let's move. We need to understand what is remote versus local repository. The local repository is in your computer. This is my computer, this is my friend's computer, and the remote repository is hosted on GitHub. There are other services as well, GitLab and all. So in this we will say that this is in GitHub. So our local repository is the computer that you use, and the remote repository is in the GitHub. So from this we can take a copy, add features and push it back. And my friend can also take a copy, add features and push it back. And finally, after merging, we will have our complete project. So the remote is what is hosted on the GitHub, and the local is our computer, the user's computer. It can be your computer, your colleague's computer. So let us start with the git commands. So what is git clone? If you have a GitHub repository and you need that code in your computer, you can use git clone. And after using git clone, we can get the code of something. That means we can just go to GitHub. If this is not signed in, I can just go to Google. I will just GitHub code. Sample code, something like this. You can either sign in or we can just view the codes. This is Azure Sentinel sample code, and here we have a link. If you copy this link and put it here, git clone, and copy that link and paste instead of this, the repo link, this link, every GitHub repo has that. You can just copy the HTTPS link, and if you put it git clone and that link, it will be cloned into your computer. That means everything that it has, that means these things will be cloned into your system and you can use it. And the next thing is git add. So we need to understand one thing. If you download everything using git clone into your computer and you have to do some changes, you mean I just took this and made some changes into this license. I made some changes into the license, and now these changes have to be staged and committed. That means everything in GitHub that need to be tracked should be staged first. The staging happens when we use git add. If you only want to add this one file, that means I change the license, so I will add git add license, that file name. Or I have made changes to multiple ones. I don't want to keep mentioning the each line by line. I can just use git add dot. It will add all the files. It adds new changed file to the working directory of git called staging area. That means it will just take the changes that you have made and it will make it into a staged files. So if you clone the directory, with that link and make some changes, first it will be changed or modified. The file will be called modified. Then we can add the changes, git add that file, that is git add license. Then that change will be staged. After staging it, we can commit it. Git commit some message. Some message means usually we will commit what that milestone is. Usually we do it for adding a feature. In this, I think I have renewed a license, some license name something. So I will just write git commit -m, that is a message. That message passed here will be license renewed. So after doing that, it will be tracked by git and everything will go back to modified. Now the next thing is to push it. We know that there is a remote repository. I think if you have a remote repository, that is you have created a remote repository here in GitHub. and now the git clone and the changes, everything was made in your computer, and you want to push it to your repository. You have to push it to your repository. You can use git push origin. Origin is the name. Usually it is a convention to use origin. It is called the remote repository. And main means the branch. Usually the main, it is used in the main branch. These branch names can be modified. So what we did, we cloned the repository. That means we'll take everything from a repository. We made some changes, we added the changes, we committed the changes, and we will just push it back to the main. Usually we won't just clone the clone repository. If we clone repository, mostly it is your repository. This is not my repository. For a project, you will, if it is not your project, you will just pull the repository. So we understood the basics. We will clone it, add it, commit it, and push it. So you have to always follow this order. It is the basics of GitHub. So clone means we will get the files, add means we will stage the modified files, and commit means these modified files will be tracked by GitHub. So there's some file status. There is untracked. Untracked means after cloning this repository, I made a new file. This is my name, hello.md. I made a new file. That file was not previously inside that GitHub repository. I made something new. That new thing will be called untracked. It is only in your repository and it is not in your. And modified means something that I have changed. That is the license that I made change to. And staged is what that modified will become once you add it. Git add that license, then this modified will become staged. And the state change can be committed. State change will be committed and then pushed to the remote repository. After committing, it will be staged. It will be saved in our system. If you want to save it in GitHub, you have to push it. And there are some small other codes called git log. In git log, we will just use it. It is just used to get the logs. It will just show what is the commit 1, what is the second commit, and if there's any merging happening and everything like that. It will just shows the history of changes. And git status. Git status will show how many files are modified, how many files are staged, how many files are unchanged. It will just give us an understanding of what all we have modified and all. So this, and there is an example for a workflow. We make a repository. If you have an account in GitHub, you can make a repository, clone it, make changes to it, add it, then it will be staged, then commit it. After committing, it will be saved in our system. To push it into our GitHub repo, we have to push it. Git push origin main. And now there are branches. Branches in Git serve as independent files. Independent file lines. That means there is a main branch. I made a change here, I made a change here, I made a change here. But from here, my friend is also working on system. He will make his branch and he will make a feature. He will clear the bugs of the feature and he will add more features. And within that time, I will also make other features. So what happens is this got split. So this is the main branch. The main branch is here. And what my friend is working on, it is a separate branch. We can get that branch. To create a new branch, we can just write git branch and branch name. I will write git branch feature 1 to get a new branch, and my friend will work there. So while he is making changes, I can keep adding new features. So git branch will show all the branches to the repository. If you want to create a branch, it is git branch and branch name. Then there is git checkout. Git checkout is used to jump from one branch to another. So after making some changes, my friend wants me to check out his features. So right now I am in main branch. So I will write git branch feature git checkout feature 1. So I will jump from main to the feature branch. So git checkout is basically used to access another branch. And finally, after making the necessary changes, we have to merge it. I will merge these two into a new commit. This is called git merge branch name. So I will, after my friend made all the changes, he will write git merge main. That is, the feature branch would be merged into the main branch. These circles are the commits, different commits or different milestones. Feature, one thing added, next thing added, next thing added. And git pull will fetch the merged commits from the untracked remote repository. That means if I have another branch also, there is another branch and another changes are happening, git pull will get all the data into your local repository and also merge it if there are any changes. These changes didn't happen in your feature 1. These changes didn't happen in your feature 1. So if you pull that repository, I will get these changes also added to our local repository. So these are basically working directory. If you add it, we will move to the staging area, and if you commit, it will be saved in your local repository, and we can push it to your remote repository. Remote repository is GitHub. So this is a nice way to visualize it. And after making the changes, a new local repository, we can just pull all the changes. Pull means it will all take everything that happened and pull it into your local repository. And git checkout, that means we can change the branch. Git checkout, we can make a new branch and make changes there. So these are the basics of GitHub that you need to know. There are a little bit more codes of reset, revert, etc. But this is the starting point. From here, you can move on forward to be a master at GitHub. So thank you for watching and goodbye.